Hi, Dr. Pantea. Um, okay, so today is Monday, 10/20/2025, and I recorded over the weekend the video about the first few questions of the form you gave me. And I have a story that I wanted to ask you about for our session, and I'll let you decide what comes through for you if it should be a focus for me in that session or not. Like I respect what comes through for you, but I did want to put it out there because I think it's important for me to at least mention it and, maybe if I may ask you to like feel it out and see again what comes through. So thank you. Okay. It's a little awkward to leave a one-way recording. So thanks again for bearing with. All right. So here's the deal. Let me get my brain there. So this is back when I was maybe not a freshman. I think it was my second year at college. Yes. So sophomore. I'm at a SUNY school, that's State University of New York. I don't know if you remember. I didn't have any support with parents getting me into college. Actually, because I played sports and I was a really, like good student grades wise, and I was very active in a lot of things with, my friends and whatnot, different groups of friends. I was scouted for not, I played field hockey and lacrosse. I was also a cheerleader, thinking of athletic things, but I was scouted for field hockey. Um, yeah, I was like selected to be in the Empire State Games for my county for New York, State and stuff like that. So anyway, I'll make this short. I don't know why. I don't know why I'm focusing on these details, especially details that aren't necessarily like significant to the story, but I'm gonna do my best. So yeah, I decided not to play for a D1 school, like Division 1 school, because my friends that, some of my friends, we would go visit friends of ours that had already graduated and gone to college, gone away. And some of those friends that played sports, like D1 in college, they were like beefed up and they always had like mandatory study. You couldn't go out. And I just remember thinking to myself, it didn't feel right. Like I wasn't that passionate about playing sports. Like I loved it because of the energy of playing with a team and like being in the zone, the flow. Like when you're on in games or in practice, it's just like such a beautiful feeling. I know you can feel that in many different ways, but I remember back to that's why I loved sports and like helping my teammates and then have them help me and do something awesome or like figure out where I can do better. Like I feel like that's a parallel to life, not to sound too cheesy, but anyway, so because I decided not to go D1, it's not like I had an actual like scholarship in paper in front of me, but the thing was like from my coach was that I was going to be like I don't know if you could say recruited and I would get a scholarship and I would be D1 and I just didn't want to do that. So anyway, I thought that was my out for not having parental support. So it was so tempting to do that, but it just didn't feel right. So I decided to just figure it out for myself, how to get a student loan. I mean, my guidance counselor at school, Mr. McPherson, I still remember his name. And again, this is high school, was really confused because he was like reaching out to my parents to talk with them about student loan, and they never returned the calls. And like no one understood how abusive my house was growing up. Like I was not even living there. I would stay at like for my friend Michelle Caltorti. She had an older brother, and like her house was like the hangout house, and so Michelle, I would sleep over there a lot, and her parents didn't care. I was like one of the family. In fact, I even went with them one summer because Mrs. Colatorti was originally from St. Thomas, and I got to stay the whole summer out there with Michelle. She was able to bring me because she brought different friends every summer. Um, and so I lived in St. Thomas for a summer and felt like they weren't super warm, like, and that's okay, but so it's not like I really felt super cozy as part of the family, but they definitely allowed me opportunities like that and like felt like, um, So then I would also stay at there was a friend of mine. It was like three sisters. Gloria was the youngest. She was like a year or two younger than me, which she was like the little kid. Erica, oh, Erica was 1 year younger than I was, and Rebecca was 1 year older. So even though I wasn't like exactly the same in terms of age-wise or class-wise, I was super close, especially with Rebecca and also with Erica, not so much Gloria, the youngest. But anyway, their dad was a pastor, Pastor Rapp in the neighborhood, and their mom, Peggy, was a social worker for CPS. And just not that I necessarily knew exactly what her job was, but she was definitely like one of the warmest, kindest people I ever knew. Um, I used to lie a lot about the bruises I had on my body. I'm about to cry. If like friends noticed it, I remember one time stands out in my mind. I was like reaching for something from my locker and my wrist the bruises showed. It was my friend Daniela. She's like, "What's that?" And I was like, "Oh, I got it in practice." Like I would cover up all the time. There were very few people. I think maybe Michelle and then Rebecca. They were called the Raps, in case I say that because their last name was Rap. They knew, but really everyone else, like I wasn't really their business and I didn't talk about it. And plus I didn't want to bring that into the rest of my life, you know. It was like a nice reprieve to not have to deal with that. So anyway, like I said, I was essentially like raising myself and living outside of the house. And it's not like I was like a runaway. Um, Even Pastor Rapp and Peggy, Mrs. Rapp, would come to my house. Oh my gosh. They would come to my house and ask me to come with them. And my mom would yell. And I remember Peggy, because I was sort of young, maybe like ninth grade, eighth, I don't know, her saying in the car, because I ended up leaving the house, I grabbed clothes and left with them. And my Peggy was saying to Pastor App that she thought my mom had bipolar disorder, along with other things. But I don't know, that just always stuck out to me because I don't know if my mom even went to a doctor to get any clinical diagnosis like that. But I don't know, for what it's worth, it always stuck with me. And I wonder, but yeah, they would look out for me and that meant so much. And Peggy, because I was over there so much, I would sleep there like weeks at a time. I almost had like my own, I shared a bedroom with Rebecca, but it was like my bedroom. I had like a bit of the closet and Peggy would say to call her mom. I never really felt comfortable doing that, but anyway, so back to the reason I brought this up is because I put myself, I figured out how. I don't know if I finally got a signature or my guidance counselor found a way around it, but I got a student loan in my name and I ended up paying that all off myself even after college. But the point is, it was my sophomore year when I'm at SUNY Oneonta, I'm at school, and it was two of my friends, two of my close friends at school, Michelle and Vicky, and we went away during spring break. And now my birthday is March 16th, so it's either during spring break or right after, usually times itself out this way. And we decided to go to the Bahamas. And this wasn't like a crazy, let's go crazy spring break trip. It was like we just happened to like not be going home for spring break. And I saved up money. I actually, maybe this is important as part of my bio. Um, because I was had to be independent in order to survive from like a early age. I like faked I think you have to be 13 to get a working permit, and I like lied somehow. And I started working when I was like 11 when it wasn't legal. So I'd been working like, I mean, I had so many jobs, I can't even tell you, like babysitting, of course, but also like other things. I worked at the pool at the country club um in the area. We weren't like able to join the country. We weren't like members of the country club. Um, but this is Long Island. And I don't know, I just did so many things. I can't even remember back. I was just always, oh, I worked at a clothes store called Jeffrey's with one of my friends. But meanwhile, this is me like going to school, having a social life, having boyfriends, doing well in class and working. And I think I mentioned playing sports with all the practices and games. I don't know how I managed it, but I did. So all that money that I like was able to save up and like hide from my parents, I would use that to do stuff like send myself to field hockey camp during the summer. I used it to go on this vacation in Bahamas, is what I mean. Uh, so back to that, again, it wasn't like a crazy. I had started going on spring break when I was probably in high school. I remember a bunch of my friends and I took a plane ride. We took a trip to Cancun, and that was a crazy spring break, like woohoo, especially since we were like underage and you were able to drink. And not that I was like a crazy, crazy partier, but I definitely dabbled in that because, I was a kid. And anyway, so just to set the tone of this Bahamas vacation, again, it's my sophomore year in college. I'm going with two of my friends that were able to go with me. And we were only there for maybe a week or less. And I remember it wasn't like the first few days of our trip, but sort of in the middle, we met these locals and they were super nice. I mean, they let us come on their boat and they took us to some local spots with other friends of theirs. It wasn't like we were just alone with them or whatever. And I remember they took us to this conch restaurant that you could only go to with a boat. And it was amazing. And we, were doing other things, but we had mistakenly, like two true ignorant college kids. I admit I was totally ignorant. I didn't think I was that naive, but especially in hindsight, I know I definitely was. Um, we had told them what hotel we were at. And so I remember they asked us, they were like, can we pick you up at your hotel and take you to this party? And we had the three of us had kind of sidebarred, like talked about it, and we decided yes. And we said, like, again, we were definitely naive, but we were thinking we weren't. We were like, oh, we'll let them drive us, but we'll just always stay in public, like at the party and see if we can get a different person to ride us home or take a cab. But cabs out there are also kind of known to be dangerous, especially if you're a tourist and, a woman, blah, blah, blah. So, we were like kind of walking that line of like what feels right and we'll check in with each other. So, anyway, we let them pick us up from the hotel. And this is probably why I was telling you all that other stuff, because getting to it feels like a little scary. And I'm about to get to it. So they took us to this place and said they need to pick stuff up from the party. And I don't know if they said it outright, but it wasn't like hardcore drugs. I was never attracted to that or into that. But I think they said it was marijuana, like weed or whatever. And so we decided, like, sure. And we were all going to stay in the car. And at the last second, one of the guys that we knew, and they were like super friendly again, asked me, he's like, hey, Amy, why don't you come with me and I'll show you because it's actually really pretty. And I was like, oh, but these guys can, why don't we all go? And he was already starting to walk. I'm sure this guy was like really skilled in it. Actually, I'm going to skip over this because that's not the main story that I'm trying to tell you, but yeah, this is actually where I was taken somewhere and isolated and brutally attacked and raped. And it's like, yeah, I'll just skip over. That's where, I don't know. I guess one thing that is important is when we got back to the car, obviously I was trying to hold it in. I thought because, okay, one other thing that might be important. This might have to do with the jinn or the evil. So even when back to like me walking off with this guy, and it was like his big mansion. Lord knows, I still don't know if that was even his house, but there was like a private beach, and it was dark. It was night, and that's where it happened. But the scary part, I'll just mention one part of it, is that he went from being super nice, like obviously that's part of the manipulation and the strategy, until he started calling me, he had his hands around my neck and started calling me awful things, CUNT, BITCH, you know, and started beating on me, hitting me, getting me down, um, yeah. And it was just this thing where I'm like this little naive little puppy. Like, why are you doing this? Why would you do this? Like I'm so naive. So that was one part of it, again, not getting into all the specifics and the graphic stuff, but yeah, so then also, um, getting back into the car, I think this was part of my survival from like when I was a kid and what I was going through that was really horrific in the home. Um, I pretended I was okay to my friends and everyone just because I wanted to get where we were going. And I actually said, I was like, you know what? If you could drop us off at the hotel instead of the party, I forgot something or whatever. So I got them to bring us to the hotel. And I can't even tell you how much control it took to hold everything in and hide. And I was sort of bleeding in places, and it was dark in the car, and I was in the passenger front seat. So my friends that were in the back couldn't necessarily see me yet, but it wasn't until we got into the hotel, like left the car and went into the hotel that they were like, what happened? Like seeing things. And I finally let it come out, like just the shock turned into tears, blah, blah, blah. So, okay, now I'm getting to the main event. As if that wasn't enough, right? So I have this trip where, it was awful with Vicky and Michelle. I tried to tell them, like, just separate from me, enjoy the rest of your trip, like I'll just take care of things myself. Like I had to go into the police. They had to send me into the hospital for like a rape kit thing. And then they had this whole sting operation where because I had remembered his name and what he looked like, of course, and stuff, they knew of this guy. And I guess this wasn't the first time he'd done something like this. So they were trying to do the sting operation where I was supposed to say yes when he came to called the hotel and say, please come. And then they were going to get him in the lobby. I mean, it was like a whole thing. And I was trying to deal with it without Michelle and Vicky. But of course, they were like, no, we can't let. But anyway, when we got back to school, um, again, everyone else, all of our friends are coming back from being at home for spring break or whatever they were doing, separate from us for spring break. And because it was my birthday, and again, because I played sports, it was like this thing, it was almost like being in a sorority. Like, excuse me to be I'm sure this is offensive to some people that I was never into sororities, but it's funny that I think that and feel that way when being on a team is sort of like being a sorority yourself, because we were hazed and we were rookies and, you know, and um and then when like a birthday comes around, you go to all the different houses, like with all the guys, like the guys' soccer house, the rugby house, the lax house, lacrosse. And at every house, everyone celebrates your birthday. Like you do shots and, they sing a song or do something. I don't know. It's very sweet. I think it's thoughtful and kind, especially because I grew up without celebrating my birthday. I never really got presents. I think I remember one time getting like a shirt or something from my mom, but yeah, it was like very kind, I thought. And because we're back at school and I didn't want Michelle and Vicky, who I was on the trip with, to tell even our suite mates, our flatmates. Um, I didn't want them to tell anybody. I was just going on like nothing had happened. And and I think I reported to the school. I asked to see the school psychologist, like the therapist, and I went to see the therapist. And just a sidebar about her, she was super sweet. I don't remember her face. I'm sure she was like an angel. All I remember is that she would give me the longest and best hugs. I don't even remember what we talked about or how many sessions we had. It couldn't have been many, but I just got like the best hugs from her. And maybe that's all I needed. Like, that has value for sure. Like talking has value different ways, but just like getting a hug and oh, just brings me tears. So anyway, I didn't want them to tell anybody. So again, like while we're still in the last couple days of spring break, back at school, everyone's like, we need to go out for Doria's birthday. And so we're started out at a couple different houses, and still I wasn't like a big drinker. Like I had friends that would drink till they like passed out, or my friend Carrie, she would like always have blackouts, where when we would be recuperating the next day from parties the night before. I remember Carrie was always the one that she's like, I totally blacked out. I don't even remember any of that, so like I was never like that. And I think that's because I had drank from an early age. Like, not that I was, again, like even a big drinker, but I was exposed to that because, I mean, to sound cheesy, I was like a popular kid in high school. And so I always got invited by the popular kids or the older kids to go out to different parties. And, with some of my other like friends that were also that way, or how you put it. Like I know high school dynamics, it's like weird. Um, so I was exposed to it, but I never really, I think because I don't know if logic even should apply, but like, I guess I think about it if like kids who aren't exposed to it and go away to college are like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna drink, and do whatever. And for me, I was always exposed to it. I had like a fake ID because I worked at the country club and since I was so young, the older kids that worked there would like take me out even. They got me a fake ID um, and so I would be out at bars, and it's not like I was so bad with drinking. It's just that it was like normalized to me in a way, like it wasn't new. I didn't think it was like the best thing, but whatever. Okay, skipping over that. So we're out at these houses, and it wasn't until like the third house we're at. I remember it was the rugby house. And for some reason, Dr. Pantea, I decided to leave this house, this party by myself, which is never like, that's not something I would ever do and not something any of my friends would ever let us do. You just don't do that. Like, you travel as a group, you walk to each of the houses because they're pretty much in the same proximity near to downtown. And it's just not a thing. And um I'll just skip to like so I remember being at this house and then when I woke up or came to the next memory I have, I was in a well, first of all, I didn't even see where I was, but I was in a truck and I saw fire in front of me. And cops and firemen were trying to grab me out from this truck, this vehicle. And then I was like yelled at and asked questions. And I was just basically coming to. And then I did get put in a police car and brought downtown to the station. And I had no idea what was happening. And I was telling the truth to the officers, and they kept saying, well, what sorority are you in? They thought it was like a sorority prank. They were like, what kind of prank did they tell you to do? And I was like, I'm not in a sorority. This isn't a prank. And I had actually at this time I didn't have like a fake ID. I had my sister, because my sister was 3 years older, and I had one of her like old licenses or something like that. So they frisked me and they found my sister's ID and they were like, this isn't you. And I was like, oh yeah. And this is one time I know I lied. I said, yeah, my sister left it for me and I was hanging on to it for her. I'm sure they knew I was lying, but that was the only conscious thought I thought, like, I can't tell them I used her ID at the bar because that's illegal. That came through. But other than that, it was like scared. I kept saying, I don't know what happened. I don't know. And then when I was at the station, they played like good cop, bad cop with me. And that I don't know if it's because I watched movies before or just my intuition, but it definitely came through that one cop, when they were together questioning me at the station, they were like, one cop was yelling and like, I know you're lying. We'll keep you here until you tell the truth. And I was like, I don't have anything else to tell you. And then the nicer guy would be like, hey, let her get some water. Do you need to go to the bathroom? And and I remember I did go to the bathroom. And sorry, this is like a little TMI. They had to watch me go to the bathroom because I guess they thought I might do something like throw up or I don't know. And I remember I had like a tampon in normally. And because I was starting to realize like something really scary just happened to me, and I had just come back from that trip where I was like raped and everything. Um, oh, there's something else I forgot to tell you about the rape. So, that might be important, not the whole story, but I thought about the sexual aspect of it, and not because I had the tampon, I was like, oh, must be okay or whatever. And my clothes were okay. But yeah, so I end up being totally, I do not remember, even to this day, Dr. Ponte, which is where my main question comes through for the session, is where, how should I not be accessing these memories? I'm sure the angels like have kept those memories from me to like save me from it. But I can't help as a human being but be curious about it. Because so the cops ended up like stopping the interrogation, like because they left me alone with the nice cop, the good cop, and I told him I was like, "Look, I know the other guy officer is like really mad and trying to get me to tell him something." I'm like, I have to confide in you too. Like I have nothing else to say. I don't know how I got there myself. Like help me understand it, you know?" And it ended up to be that I was in a NYSEG, New York State Electric and Gas. I might have told you this in the consult. I feel like I'm getting deja vu. Um, and so NYSEG pressed charges against me, and they tried to press criminal charges, and I got like deposed. I mean, this is so weird because I'm not somebody who was ever involved with breaking the law. I was like Miss Goody Goody, you know, just trying to survive, like in the terms of like, I want to do well in school, I want to make the best of myself, you know, like I guess I went that route. Never really did drugs, and maybe I drank, you know what I mean? It was just like I was outside of my element and new to me. And you know, so they uh deposed me, the prosecuting lawyer, and this is again in a small town, Oneonta, like upstate New York. I'm from the city, you know, so I don't know anything about upstate, small town. Everyone knows each other, you know, it's a college town, so they hate like the college kids, I'm sure. And they think they probably make the assumption we're all just doing stupid stuff all the time, you know, and it's our fault. But anyway, I had no support. I remember trying to call home and talk to my parents about it because I needed a lawyer and I didn't have the money for that. And my parents, I can't even quite remember. I feel like my dad showed some kindness, but no one ever like helped me call for lawyers or had a meeting with them. I did that all myself, but somehow my dad must have helped me pay for it. I don't really remember that part. So I guess um they were trying to prove that I am like some drunk college kid doing a stupid prank. That was the prosecutor, like how he asked questions. He's like, "Do you know where the post office is?" And I was like, "Kind of. I don't really have to go there." And then they were like, "Do you know where these three bars are?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I've definitely been to those bars. I know they're on whatever street," I said. And it was almost like I was trying, he's obviously a lawyer, has a strategy, like he's trying to frame it like, you know, I only know the bars downtown because I'm such a drunk or whatever. It's like we didn't really go downtown, especially because I was playing sports. We got a lot of help from our coaches, like if we ever need stamps or something, you know, like I don't know. It's like weird. So, oh, and I ended up playing D3, by the way. I don't know if I mentioned that because I decided not to go D1 when the coach at the school, Sonia Oneonta, that I ended up going to, when she heard I was enrolled, she recruited me. She tried to convince me to play. She even asked me to come up for a weekend where I would like hang out with the other players. You know, it's something that's done. I'm sure maybe you know about it. And so I decided to play there, even though it was D3. And I'm so glad I did. It was a beautiful experience. And none of the, I mean, it was still competitive, but it wasn't like as competitive or, you know, as D1, you know, it was D3. So anyway, okay. So yeah, I just realized that might have seemed off if, you know, I remember mentioning I didn't want to take a scholarship and all that kind of stuff because I didn't want to do one. So anyway, um, so here's the thing is that I didn't have any support. I'm going through this, and even my friends didn't know what to do. No one, I think I remember one of my friends, I remember crying to Michelle. She was actually my roommate, like out of my flat, like all my suite mates. We're all close friends, but Michelle and I, she was Michelle that I grew up with. Like we went to the same high school and we're close friends. So I remember crying with my head on her lap or her shoulder. And like, so I'm not going to say no one was really there for me, but no one really knew how to be there for me, I'm sure. And also, no one was. And the only thing I remember is that one of my friends, who was also one of my teammates and also one of my flatmates, Carrie, her dad I thought it was her dad, it's actually her uncle. It was a cop in somewhere in upstate New York. It wasn't right in Oneonta, but you know, like a small town upstate. And he was the one, he came down because they used to come visit Carrie all the time, her parents, her dad, because you know, this school wasn't too far from where she was from. Whereas like me, it was at least a 4 hour drive or whatever. And I remember this conversation where the uncle and the dad, Carrie's family, were like, "Hey, we went and looked at that parking lot where they found you, and the fences are like 8 or 9 feet tall and they're topped with barbed wire. There's locks on it." And I think they found out somehow that when the police and fire department arrived on the scene, they had to break the locks. So it was actually locked with me inside. And they were like, "Do you know how you got there? Like, do you remember somebody picking you up on the road when you were walking?" And I was like, "No." And they had said something, I don't know if it was me listening to them kind of talk amongst each other, that like a NYSEG worker, not that they were necessarily even on shift or whatever, must have picked me up on the road. Like when I left that party and was walking by myself, I must have gotten picked up on the road by somebody, and they brought me into that parking lot because they work there, they have access, like the key or code or whatever. And then something must have happened and they left me there. But when the police and the fire department found me, it was because the truck had been driven into a light pole inside the parking lot and it was on fire and I was going to die. And so I had no idea. And the only thing when I checked in with myself to remember, I sort of remember Dr. Pantea, like I've never driven a car like this, but it was a truck, like a utility truck or whatever for this NYSEG. I do remember the gears being like not a handle in the side like regular cars where you can switch gears if you drive stick. It was like you change the gears and some stick thing under the steering wheel. And I remember trying to figure that out. It was like hazy. So I must have, I don't know if like I'm the one who railed it into the thing after the guy left. I'm assuming it was some guy. Um, and I was just trying to drive out of there, not realizing where I was. I don't know, but that's a question because I have no memory. And there's so many questions. Like my friends, when we were trying to put the night together, they were like, "Oh yeah, we don't know what happened to you at the rugby house." And they said I was trying to protect one of the rookies. I guess one of like our player friends. Like he's fine to be a friend, but he's like a player. Um, and just goes after the rookies, like the freshmen. I remember they said I was said something to him, like, "You better not try anything with her." Like I was trying to protect her. And not that I was like a crazy person about it, but they said it was like out of character for me. And it must have been because I had just come back from that trip, that connects or that tracks. But then they said that they don't know why to get to where I went, I would have had to make a right out of, you walk out of the house onto on the street and you make a left to go downtown, which is where we would have all gone together. But instead, I made a right, which, like, this particular house is like the last on that row. You would never go to the right, like, not to get to another house. We had already been to all the houses anyway, and you wouldn't get to downtown that way. So it made no sense that I went to the right. So people were like, why would you leave by yourself and why would you make a right when you've never gone to the right? And so that was weird. Also, people had said that I was probably roofied, and it was likely at the rugby house, which I'd never heard of the rugby guys doing that before, but I know it happens, and who knows, because I was never one to like drink enough to be that out of it, and also not to black out. So it made sense. And it's not like they ever did a blood test on me, so I will never know that either. But yeah, so I ended up um, hearing Carrie's dad and uncle saying these things, and I didn't know. I didn't have any family unit to rely on for support. And when I did get that lawyer, he wasn't very helpful. I think he just stereotyped me. He thought I was like a rich college kid, which I was not. I was like middle class at best, lower middle class. And but he heard I was from Long Island, and like I was doing mischief at school apparently with this thing, even though that's not part of my personality. And he never, I think I remember we went to the courthouse for the trial for like a hearing. It wasn't the trial. And he just kept going back to the judge's chambers. And I heard from somebody sitting behind, they were like, "Oh, they're probably talking about golf on Sunday," or and I just remember thinking like this guy's not even advocating for me, and I didn't know what to do, but they ended up dropping the criminal charges. So I didn't have to, I took some sort of plea deal where it like didn't go on my record. It was like low enough that it doesn't go on your record. And I had to do community service and also go to alcohol counseling, which I was fine to go to I went to alcohol counseling. They didn't find that I had a problem because, they put you through all this testing and they monitor you and you go to sessions and they were like, you know, not finding that I had a problem. And the community service, I was already doing community service. Like I love it. So, I mean, that wasn't too bad. But then what was like really, I guess, bad, if you want to sign it, was that they came back, they dropped, like I said, the criminal charges. It didn't go to trial. And actually, if I was having true guidance, it probably would have made sense to go to trial because, like, what would they find? Like, what angers me, which I worked on letting go of, but as I'm telling you the story, it's sort of like coming back up, is that no one asked my lawyer, like, or like even me, I didn't know to ask, like, are you looking into any camera footage from the parking lot? Like, I don't know. This is like the mid early 90s or whatever. Maybe they didn't have that yet. I don't know. But like, do they have any workers? Did they have to like badge in and they know who went in at that time? Or, like no one looked into it from a point of view that like I was the victim. I was the one being taken advantage of. And this wasn't my doing, even though I got caught up in it and I was the person there when they came to the scene. So, they do a blood test to check if I was like roofied or something. And because I didn't have any other drugs, I wouldn't have done any drugs. I mean, I don't know. And so it was like that. And then when they came at me with the criminal or sorry, civil charge, they asked me to pay some crazy amount. And I remember my lawyer said he would like negotiate it down or something. And I ended up having to pay, they came up with a payment plan where I like paid it off. And I think my dad actually helped with some of that, which is really weird again to think. Um, but anyway, that was like after it. But uh yeah, so I ended up having that happen and I didn't know what I still like to this day, I've tried to go to like a hypnotherapist and I never go under, like no matter who I've gone to, even for other things, not to ask about that. Like I have QHHT, which with the intention to just ask my guides about like bring me to a past life that, I need to that's relevant to my life now, blah blah, whatever. I don't know what I'm saying. Like I never seem to go under, I never like I mean, I just relax and try to be, but it still like never happens that I go into that state. So anyway, I don't know what happened. And again, if in our session that comes through and I'm supposed to know. I mean, it used to eat me up where I would go to sleep and that would be one of my thoughts where I'd be like, can I just please know? And, I'm happy to say it's not been like that for many years, but it's times like this when I bring it back up and I'm like, gosh, it's so weird that I'll like literally never know. Oh, so the one last thing that came up that I made a note on, that came up with my mom, and this is like sexual stuff. Uh, so at one point when I had a break at school, oh, I think it was because I transferred schools after that. Like I couldn't go to school at Oneonta anymore. Like I knew for myself that I didn't want to be there anymore. Because I never felt supported by that community. Even when I went to the coach of my team to let her know, this was actually a new coach because it was going to be lacrosse season when I went back, following spring break. What is that, like the last semester before the year ends? Winter, I guess. That's when I was supposed to go to her and even though she was a new coach, I hadn't played for her yet, but I let her know I wasn't going to be coming back for the next season and she was just like whatever. like no heart, and I wasn't making it like a way like you should be heartbroken that I'm not it's just like it just never made any sense to me that she could be that way. And yet you're in a position of being a coach. Like, gosh, have some compassion, dude. I didn't even tell her exactly, why. And I said, I had something really personal and tragic happen, and I think it's best I wouldn't be able to give my, 110%. So I won't be able to play, blah, blah. And then they put an article out in the school paper and the local paper, and they called it like a student goes on a joyride, if you can believe it. And they wrote the article that I guess it was from the police blotter, I'm sure, and whatever the police, but they said it was like Amy Doria in college at SUNY Oneonta caught on a joyride. It was totally misrepresenting what was happening, and I just felt like I was no longer aligned at all. And I looked for other schools, and I ended up um, getting my few belongings from back home, back in New York at the house where, my parents lived and my sister. And I got a flight and I got enrolled in a school out in Arizona. I'd never even been to Arizona, I ended up loving it out there. Those are my favorite times. I had some really good times back at Oneonta, but this was like such a blessing. And so, anyway, the point I was bringing up about that is that when I was home, because I had, no, I was no longer going to Oneonta, and it was like summer, sometime in the summer, and I was just going to be getting my stuff to go to this transfer to this other school, and it's back in Long Island, and I ended up telling my mom because something somehow came up, like my friends when I was back from that trip. You know, before the night I just told you about, but like we came back from the Bahamas and all my bruises were starting to turn dark purple. And for some reason, some of the bruises or something were like still remaining on me even those months later. I don't know. It was something that my mom saw on me or something. And she asked me about it, and I took a moment and I was like, you know what? I'm going to tell her. So I remember I was in my childhood bedroom, sat on the bed with her, and I told her, I was like, I was brutally raped. I was attacked and I was raped. And her first reaction, Dr. Pantea, was, how could you not, like yelling at me, how could you not tell your father about this? And I was like, what? Why would I tell dad? And and she was just like so pissed at me for that. She wasn't even compassionate in a way like, I'm so sorry that happened to you, or like gave me a hug, or sorry, I'm plugging my phone in. And nothing like that. And that all she had was anger towards me. And I don't know if it was in that same conversation or later that same day or something, but I ended up like circling back with her somehow again. And she told me that, and this is really gross, I think. Um, her brother, because my mom, I had two uncles, she had two brothers growing up in Brooklyn. And one of her brothers, the brother that I knew, like the uncle that we visited most often, is he lived still in Brooklyn, even when we were on Long Island. And I was born in Queens. It's all kind of like near each other in the boroughs in New York. But she told me about how he molested her and times in the pool where he would put his hands on her. So gross. And she never told her dad. And she said that was one of the things she, even when her dad was on his deathbed, she was like, I'll let him die before I ever tell him anything about his son. So I think it was her, how do you say, like, projecting onto me what was going on with her, like yelling at herself for her not telling her father about what was going on with her brother. But still, it was hard to deal with, even if I could like logically make sense. Well, that's why she would do it. It's still very hurtful and hard to navigate, especially as a kid. So, so I have a meeting starting. So, I ended up, yeah, my mom, ends up telling my sister, who that's like a really tough relationship, which I'll get into not in this recording. But one other final thing, maybe related to me like transferring schools and whatnot. So when I was in high school, I was with a bunch of my friends, and especially like a close circle of close girlfriends. where I think, in my neighborhood, very Italian, we'd always have all the Italian feasts, and this must have been like the San Gennaro feast in the summer. And, they have all like the little rides and, especially consider this is like back in the day. Like I'm sure feasts have gotten like better and nicer since then. Like, they were usually like very seedy, but you didn't really care because it was just fun because, they travel everywhere and it's like the rides aren't even that safe and the food's probably gross, like not FDA approved or however you say it. Like if the health inspector came by, like boo, but you don't care, obviously, like when you're doing it, especially when you're a kid. So anyway, I remember we went into this one weird tent for psychic because this is like our senior, maybe our junior year. I can't remember, but it's when you're finding out about the schools that you apply to. Oh, it was the summer before our senior year and whether we get in or not, and like maybe we had just like applied to schools and it wasn't going to be until months later that we found out. But anyway, that was hot on our minds. So when you go into this tent, I remember it was like a husband and wife. And I remember not thinking that they were Italian. And there's like a stereotype about them being like gypsies or something, but I really think they were like of that gypsy community. And the husband was like trying to wrangle all of us, like, oh, it's one person at a time. You only get to ask two questions, or like, or you could pay for, or it was one question, you get to pay for two or something, but that was it. And you have to make it quick. And so, of course, the question we all wanted to ask is like, where are we going to go to school or whatever, And so I remember going in, and it was the wife, the woman who was actually doing the reading. And I tell her, I ask her about going to school, and she said, you're going to go to one school, but you're going to transfer. And you're going to transfer somewhere where there's like rocky mountains or like mountains, and it's a lot of beautiful rocks. And so I think that she must have said more, but she said that was the thing for me, and I had forgotten all about it, which to me, I know probably to you it's not surprising, but because it was just like a fair, like a feast, Italian feast kind of thing, you don't, it's just for kicks, like entertainment. I had forgotten about it, but when I ended up transferring, again, all these years later, I started out in my junior year at my school in Arizona. And some of my New York friends came out to visit me, like Rebecca came out and stayed with me, Michelle, and and one of them remembered, they were like, oh my gosh, do you remember the San Gennaro when, and they said that you were going to transfer. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'd completely forgotten about it. And plus in Arizona, it was like Sedona and like all the rocks. And like, I know it's not huge mountains, but I had also applied to the Colorado, some school in Colorado. I don't know if it's University of Denver or whatever it was. I don't know. I don't even know the schools now, but I hadn't gotten in or something like that. Or like it was more expensive. I don't know, something about that. And I ended up choosing the school in Arizona anyway. So it's like it almost makes sense if you think of Rocky Mountains, like maybe that meant Colorado. But like weirdly enough, too, that I even thought to apply to that school in Colorado. So anyway, that's it. That was probably long enough, but that's a big story from my past. And it hits on a lot of things, I think, like family, the whole sexual thing, also like not feeling supported and being on my own and having like traumatic and really hard things happening without having like anyone advocate for me. Um, so it probably hits on a lot. That's why I thought if I was to take time to tell one story and, if you're willing to listen to it, this would be it. So anyway, thank you. I'm going to end it now.